Good evening. My name is Julie Connor, and I believe conversations can heal the world. In my work as a speaker and a consultant, I help people build bridges of understanding through communication, collaboration, and inclusion. About 8 years ago, I was invited to come to deliver a keynote presentation to a group, to a nonprofit organization. I met them for breakfast, and one of the members of that group leaned across the table. She pointed her finger at me, and she said, "Julie, we know you can talk about core values and goals, but I heard you share your story. We want you to speak from your heart. Share your story." I was completely prepared to talk to them about goals and core values. I was not prepared to tell my story. Author Brené Brown once said, "When we are willing to share our stories and even enter the darkness, telling those stories and owning those stories isn't near as difficult as the amount of effort and time we spent in running from our stories. Only when we are brave enough to explore the darkness do we become willing and capable of exploring and discovering our own light." Entering into challenges can be difficult. Raise your hand if you've ever felt afraid. Okay, good. That is not a rhetorical question. Raise your hand if you've ever been afraid of somebody finding out something about you that you didn't want them to know. And some have two hands up in the air. Good for you. Challenges and entering into our fear can be opportunities to ignite our passion. We can look at challenges in two ways. We can see them as obstacles that prevent us from moving forward, getting what we want and going where we want to go. Or we can view challenges as directional arrows that point us to new skills and new opportunities. Challenges can be transformational if we're willing enough to walk in the darkness. The same fire that melts butter hardens steel. So I accepted their opportunity. I accepted their invitation to share a part of my story. You see, my story begins in Omaha, Nebraska. When I was 8 years old, I knew exactly what I wanted to be when I grew up. Or sort of. I either wanted to be an actress, or a cowboy, or a professional baton twirler, or a nun. I found a way to meld all of those career opportunities into one. The vocation I chose is I became a teacher. Teaching invited me to inspire others. But through it, it also allowed me to hide from my secrets. I started to experience sadness and anxiety when I was in 3rd grade. I had no words or no vocabulary to describe the sadness I was feeling inside. And when I tried to speak about it, others would tell me, "Would you stop feeling sorry for yourself? Or you got to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and get over this." As I got older, the periods of depression and anxiety lengthened, and they grew darker. I had absolutely no vocabulary, no communication skills to describe how I was feeling and what I was experiencing, and absolutely no personal boundaries. I was the ideal target for bullying. As I entered my early teens and my early 20s, the periods of depression and anxiety lengthened, and I felt myself being gobbled up by a deep, dark hole. By the time I was in my 20s, it had mushroomed into major depression and to a severe panic disorder. Every time I felt a panic attack, I was terrified I was going to die. My father died of a heart attack when he was 46, and I thought what was happening to my heart was the same thing that was happening to his. The panic disorder mushroomed into agoraphobia. I was afraid to leave my home. I was afraid to drive. I was afraid to go anywhere. Against the begging of my family and my husband at the time, I admitted myself to a psychiatric unit in my small town hospital in the small town where I lived. This was back in the time when they called anxiety disorders nervous breakdown or hypochondria. I spent the next 2 years over-medicated on Librium and a host of other drugs. I talked to my husband at the time and tried to find out what he was feeling. One day he finally said, "Julie, you were so strong when I met you. And now when I look at our relationship, I feel like all I've got is damaged goods." Thoughts of suicide have little to do with trying to attract attention to oneself, and everything to do with finding any means possible to end the pain. I was desperate. I was willing to do anything. Those of us who have struggled with mental illness often try to find relief through escape, through overeating, overdrinking, undereating, oversmoking, overexercising. Believe me, I've done the research. I've tried all of these methods, and they didn't work. Addiction often loops into other addictions we must suppress. I was willing to do anything to find help. The help that I was looking for came in the form of a telephone call. I received a phone call from the University of Central Missouri, and they wanted somebody with teaching experience who would be able to teach a class and help them develop their curriculum. Once again, my husband and my family begged me not to accept it because I believe they were afraid. They didn't want anyone else to find out that their son had married someone who was crazy. I knew that recovery for me was going to come at great cost. In Alcoholics Anonymous, we call it willingness to go to any length. I knew when I opened my core door to accept that position that I would need to be willing to lose what was left of my relationships in the community. I need to be willing to risk losing my friendships. I'd need to risk losing my family relationships. I need to be willing to risk losing my home and my marriage. And that's exactly what happened in that order. So I got in my car And I drove to Warrensburg, 30 miles on those winding roads, and I cried the entire way. I was so scared. And I arrived at the education department, and they sent me over to the safety department. And the safety department told me that they needed somebody that could write curriculum and teach. All I needed to teach was one class, driver's education. I swear, you can't make this stuff up. And I said, I deal with depression, I have a panic disorder, and I'm agoraphobic. He said, Julie, I don't understand those words you're using, but if you trust us and you accept this position, we'll teach you how to take care of yourself behind the wheel of a car. I accepted the position. I took the classes that I needed to complete my master's degree, and I cried every way, all the way home and all the way back for a year and a half. One day, as tornado sirens blared, I drove the car through a severe thunderstorm. I got out of my car at the university, and dripping wet, I found my way to the counseling center. And I went up to the counseling center, and I stopped at the reception desk, and I said, I'm really scared, and I have a panic disorder, and sometimes I have agoraphobia, and the panic attacks are really bad, and I'm really scared. And if I just go sit over there in the corner, can I just go sit over there? And I promise I won't disturb anybody, but can I just sit there? And she said, how would you like to come back a little more often than that? And she introduced me to the psychologist on staff. I figured it's about time to start talking about what I was really afraid of. I was totally afraid that they really would find out that I was crazy. I was terrified of being wrapped into a straitjacket and locked in an institution, never to be let out again. The psychologist asked how I was feeling. And soaking wet, I said, I am delusional and psychotic. And he said, I see. What makes you think you're delusional and psychotic? And I said, because I hear voices. He asked, what are the voices saying to you? And I said, the voices are really scary. They tell me I'm damaged goods. The voices say I'm broken. The voices say I'm sick and no good. He nodded and he said, yeah, Julie, those are scary voices. But those voices that you're hearing are coming from inside of you. You have the power to change your own thought. Now let's stop here for a second. Raise your hand if you knew when you were young, whether you're young or not, that you had the power to change your own thoughts. That's frightening. And it should be, because I certainly didn't know. No one told me. And the tape that plays in our head of thoughts that scare us are like an old movie rerun, and they go over and over again. Many of the words that were on my tape came from childhood. Negative self-talk and the self-criticism that we hear inside our own head are like an old hat. If you don't like it, don't wear it. The psychologist suggested some medication, and I looked at him and said, you know, I'm very strong. And he said, yeah, Julie, I see how strong you are. And I know you're strong. He was not sarcastic when he said that. He said, are you trying to tell me that asthmatics who use an inhaler are weak? Are you trying to say that a diabetic who uses insulin isn't as strong as you? Is that what you're trying to say? And it was in that moment that I realized whatever I was wrestling with mental illness, also had a physiological aspect that could be treated. And it was the first time I had hope. Well, I continued to get in my car and drive 30 miles to the school and 30 miles away from the school, and I'd cry all the way to and all the way back. One of the most valuable tools that I found in that experience was an old cassette tape, and I realize I'm dating myself in that. I found an old cassette tape, and on that cassette tape was a guided meditation. On one side was using the body to relax the mind, and on the other side was using the mind to relax the body. I listened to that old tape go on and on and on and lead me through guided meditation until it fell apart. By the time it was in shreds, the words on that tape had become part of my own self-talk. The very last class I had to take while I was working on my master's degree was an advanced psychology course. In that course, we had to develop a behavior modification project. Most of the students in my class developed projects such as how to quit smoking or how to lose weight. In my project, I developed a sticker reward system that helped me control the number of times I got out of my car whenever I experienced a panic attack while driving. I believe I learned the family names of every single farmer between Clinton and Warrensburg and every gas station attendant. But through the sticker system, I was able to reduce the number of times I got out of the car. By the end of the semester, I was able to drive to and from the college without stopping, and that was a miracle. Thank you. It was a miracle. When I graduated from college that year, I was the only one in my family to attend my graduation. But I had a lot to be grateful for. I had many things to be grateful for. And over time, my fears of driving, of elevators, of being in front of people, my fears of speaking gradually diminished. Let me talk about elevators. I'm still working on that one. But the point isn't to be unafraid. The point is our willingness to face our fears and move through the challenge anyway. I refuse to allow fear to make the decisions about how I choose to live my life. I may not be fearless, but I am brave. As we When Kirsten Atkins asked me to talk at this year's gala, one of the first things I did is I went to the website. And on the home page are the words, "Because no one should face mental illness alone." When I heard those words, I was all in. The data is staggering. 40% of all of those who struggle with mental illness, including schizophrenia, major depression, and some of the things that I was facing in my struggle and my journey, 40% of those struggling with serious mental illness don't get treatment because they don't have the funds that provide them with the help they need. In Johnson County alone, the cost burden is $223 million. There is help. There is hope. I stand here to pay it forward to all of those who supported me, who walked me through the darkness when I could not find any way out. And I thank God for them, because if it were not for programs like Pathway to Hope, I have no doubt I would be dead. Pathway to Hope replaces despondency with faith. It replaces fear with courage, and it inspires others with courage and confidence. All of us here, gathered here tonight, are here because we believe that each one individually of us can make a great effort to save those who are still drowning in the darkness. There is help. There is hope. Pathway to Hope has big dreams, and they invite us to dream big too. They invite all of us to be part of the efforts that reach out to those struggling with mental illness, their families, and our community. And Trent, I believe with the help of everyone here tonight, we can inspire the world together. Thank you.